Okay, welcome. We're going to start. I'm Karen Remler. I'm the director of the Five College Women's Studies Research Center. And I would like to ask you, just to help us with our communications and outreach, if you would just let us know how you heard about this event. So I'm going to pass around this clipboard. You can just check the items that correspond. And then if you'd like to be on our mailing list, I'm sending around another clipboard for your information. Thank you very much. And I want to welcome you. This is a very exciting panel. We have three distinguished speakers who have very, very busy lives, and they've taken the time to drive up here today or to drive from around the corner. So we're very pleased to have them join us. I wanted to say a few words of thanks to the organizations and people who have helped put this panel together. I'd like to thank the President's Office at Mount Holyoke College, the Weissman Center for Leadership and the Liberal Arts, and the Dean of Faculty Office and the Nexus Program for contributing to this event. I also want to acknowledge the Mellon Foundation that has generously given funding to Five Colleges Incorporated to support digital humanities initiatives. And this panel is part of a year-long series at the center that looks at the ways in which digital technologies, including social media, the media itself, cyber technology, etc., it has affected and been shaped by the work of feminist scholars, researchers, activists, and teachers. I also wanted to draw your attention to our next event, a public colloquium, and two of our research associates will be presenting on their work. Sophie Toupin will be talking about feminist cloud protesting and looking at the Occupy movement and digital technologies. And Fungai Machiorori will be talking about a blog that she founded called Her Zimbabwe, which gives access to Zimbabwe women from around the world. And she'll be talking a little bit about the diaspora and how the technologies have enabled women from around the world who originated from Zimbabwe to stay in touch and also tell their narratives. And that's on November 30th from 12:30 to 2:30 at the center, which is right across 116, and we provide lunch at 12:30. So if you get there early, you get to join us for lunch. I'd also like to thank Elizabeth Lehman, who's the Assistant Director of the Five College Women's Studies Research Center, for her expert logistical talent in putting this event together, and Gabriella Perlman, who designed our flyer and keeps our website up to date. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Chris Ward, and I'm sorry I didn't get your name from Mihan from our Library and Technology, Instructional Technology Services for helping to record this event. Okay. Before I introduce the speakers and frame our discussion, I just wanted to say a few words about the panel itself and how it came about. As you probably have noticed if you've read some of the biographical information, all our speakers are entrepreneurs. They've all founded companies. They bring a set of diverse perspectives from both private and public sectors, international, national sectors. They work in the area of journalism, leadership development, and security. And we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to hear from women who are actually in the field about some of the pros and cons of engaging with digital technologies and entering the public sphere in a variety of ways. And I wanted to say a few words also about the panel, the panel's I think conceptualization. I wanted to thank Pat Drew, we worked together in conceptualizing this panel and in thinking and identifying potential speakers. And I also wanted to thank Pat for her help in this. And she's also the proud mother of a recent Mount Holyoke grad, Kimberly Drew. So she already has a connection, and she's very active in supporting women's leadership both in the public and the private sector. So thank you, Pat, for your help on this.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. So this panel of distinguished speakers is going to explore the multiple ways in which questions of physical and virtual security play out for women using media for public engagement, social networking, and journalism. And indeed, we know that journalists now depend heavily, if not completely, on mobile phones and other electronic devices to get their messages through, to get their work done, but that in some cases, they also compromise their locations. And this is particularly troubling when they're in hotspots in which they're trying to report and following the various activities that are going on, in many cases putting their lives at risk. And we know that the journalists also die out in the field, unfortunately, much too often. Indeed, security and meeting the challenges of insecurity, whether on a large scale, as in homeland security or national security, or in the daily lives of most of us who move in and out of virtual spaces, making ourselves more or less vulnerable, is a very hot topic. Need I mention the resignation of General Petraeus due to the exposure of his extramarital relationship with his biographer, Paula Broadwell, and the flurry of other revelations about email communication with an FBI agent and another woman, and the flurry of media attention to this scandal. In her recent op-ed, Maureen Dowd noted, quote, "It's worrisome that the nation's spy master could not have found a more clandestine manner of talking naughty to his biographer, Babe, than a Gmail Dropbox, a semi-private file-sharing system used by terrorists, teenagers, and authors." She also notes that maybe there are other scandals that we should be paying more attention to. I think some of our speakers are going to speak to that. I think if we look at the role of email correspondences, for example, and the way that they configure private lives and national security, I think it's important not to forget the role of technologies in the lives of everyday citizens who don't get as much press as some of the Petraeus, the folks around the Petraeus case. Virginia Eubanks, who was here recently to talk about her book, The Digital Dead End, reminds us that many women working in data entry jobs, for example, or behind computers, are themselves under constant surveillance as they struggle to meet work quotas. Women, as some of the primary seekers of social services, are bound by technologies that record their movement, their needs, their habits, and their medical states. And we hear much about social media and mobile phones in the recording and in the making of revolutions. The recent Arab Spring, for example, is one example, but also in the Occupy movement. And yet female users of the media, those who have participated in some of these movements, often find themselves under threat and even subject to deadly violence through the technology that they themselves are using. It makes them vulnerable. It makes women in general vulnerable to stalkers, even as it can save their lives. Technologies can provide means to ask for help, or it can be used to traffic human beings. The internet can incite violence, and it can also mobilize resistance to it. So the panel today is going to explore the actual implications, both troubling and liberating, of women's engagement with media in the digital age. And I've asked our speakers to address a number of questions. Some of the questions include, what are the levels of insecurity and vulnerability experienced by women as journalists, security experts, and public intellectuals? How do digital technologies contribute to increasing human security while at the same time possibly diminishing rights to privacy? And how do women put themselves at risk? And what are the means of protection and resilience in face of this risk to participants in public and social media? Okay, I'd like to introduce our panelists in the order that they will speak. And the format for this is to invite each panelist to present for about 15-20 minutes from their particular perspective. They all have PowerPoints, which is wonderful. We have visual aids since this is a panel on technologies. And then they'll be able to respond to one another, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So as I said before, I'm extremely grateful to Pat Drew for her help in putting together this panel. Pat is the CEO of Pat Drew and Company. The company provides services for high-functioning individuals and organizations. It aligns teams, manages transition, and teaches resilience. Pat and her team support New York Times journalists and corporate executives in challenging overseas assignments, including major assignments with Middle Eastern women journalists. For over 20 years, Pat has coached executives in the media, pharmaceutical companies, consumer product companies, financial and professional services, real estate, communications, non-for-profit organizations, and academia. She was director in human resources at the New York Times in the 1990s, and manager of training at the New York Psychiatric Institute of Columbia University, and most recently has worked with Gutman Development Strategies, a leadership development firm. Pat has developed some of the seminal techniques in preparing for overseas assignments. She has debriefed reporters after exposure to trauma, including being detained and held hostage. She has coached thousands of leaders, including Muslim women leaders working in Western organizations in the Middle East. Pat and her team developed and delivered programs to prepare 100 Pfizer Global Health Fellows for assignments in Africa, China, and South America. She has a series of master's degrees in psychology, social work, and European history. Our second speaker, Courtney Banks Spaeth, is a CAO of her own company, and I just have to get the right page here. She's the Chief Executive Officer of National Security Associates Worldwide, or NSAWW, and she's one of the nation's foremost experts in homeland and national security and business development. In addition to working with clients in areas ranging from homeland security, global health, and civilian life, NSAWW partners with many clients with advanced IT and cyber. Sorry, I got my pages mixed up. So she works with clients with advanced IT and cyber capabilities in their efforts to secure and protect global digital resources. Courtney's experience prior to founding NSAWW spans the public and private homeland national security sectors, from the White House and Department of Justice to the world's largest defense contractors. She has held top-level positions in homeland security sectors of the Raytheon Company and Lockheed Martin. In 2000, President Clinton appointed Courtney to the office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Low-Intensity Conflict, where she served as the assistant in charge of global terrorism issues in the Anti-Terrorism Directorate. Before serving the Clinton administration, Courtney acted as the Director of Force Health Protection for the Gulf War Illness Task Force in the Department of Defense, in which capacity she also served as a subject matter expert on combat stress management. She has also worked in the Department of Justice, in the Antitrust Criminal Division, and for the Office of Chief Counsel in the White House. She is also avidly involved in community service and has served as chair for a number of fundraising events for organizations such as Hope for the Warriors and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She was also the winner of the Heroines in Technology March of Dimes Award, and was also named as a rising star in the 2009 class of Women Who Mean Business by the Washington Business Journal. Natalia Muñoz, some of you may know her. She is a local journalist, and she works on social justice initiatives also with faculty in the Five College area. She is a multimedia artist, journalist, and a communications and marketing consultant. She has 25 plus years of experience in print, online, and broadcast media. She has covered business, education, sports, politics, and human interest stories for the Associated Press, in Barcelona, Spain, the New York Daily News, the San Juan Star, El Vocero, and El Mundo, and has worked for a number of English and Spanish language newspapers in her native Puerto Rico. She is founder and director of Verdant Multicultural Media, which promotes cultural diversity by offering services guided by the principles of inclusiveness and with a new vision about how to engage with communities and to engage communities of color. The company specializes in creating media, marketing, and communication strategies and results that connect with people of color, including women, LGBTQ, the elderly, and people with physical challenges. She's also the founder of La Prensa of Western Massachusetts, an online magazine devoted to arts, blogs, culture, media, and politics, and is also a member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. So we're very lucky to have our distinguished guests here today. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Pat, who's going to start us off. Well, please welcome.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's really great to be here. As she mentioned, my daughter graduated from Mount Holyoke in May, and it's great for me to be back here. All those trips up and back over the 4 years, and I can make even another trip, so I'm delighted to be here. How many are students at Mount Holyoke here? Raise your hand. Okay, and students at other colleges in the area? Are there other people? And faculty? Faculty members? Great. Okay, well, I hope we have a nice dialogue today. As Karen said, we're each going to talk a little bit about the questions that she identified, and then we're all going to talk together. And I'm hoping that I'll be provocative, maybe to my colleagues here on the panel. Just a little bit about me. To start with, I work with New York Times journalists, preparing them for overseas assignments, debriefing them after overseas assignments. Do training of managers on how to manage people from afar, how to reduce the stress. 22 years at the New York Times. As Karen mentioned, I was director in human resources, responsible for the whole area of employee assistance program, counseling and coaching. Okay. I also do leadership development and executive coaching with global firms, helping executives be more effective in what they do and how they work with people and how they work with their teams. In addition, I'm recently working with peer learning groups for CEO owners of privately held companies to help them grow the value of their companies. Okay, so I have a diverse portfolio that I work with, but today I'm going to talk about journalism, I'm going to talk about digital media and journalism, and talk about some of my experience with some amazing journalists, both at the Times and in other news organizations where I've worked. And spark some conversations to help us understand more what the risks and rewards are of a lot of digital media. Okay, 20 years in the New York Times. We've already plenty of that. So with journalists going over, just a little more background. With journalists going overseas, they routinely come to me for preparation. We've been doing this for 20 years at the New York Times. And they're going into very dangerous situations, and one is really important to be prepared in terms of your personal preparation, to minimize distractions. How can you be mindful? How can you be very present? This is a key thing, key aspect of security is to be very mindful of your surroundings, reduce the distractions, so we have conversations, and building skills of resilience, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The purpose is how do you stay in your top form during this assignment, and work with journalists covering natural disasters such as Katrina or Haiti, as well as man-made conflict and man-made disasters. Certainly the man-made ones are the more difficult ones to come to terms with in terms of traumatic impact on individuals. Also work with some of the pharmaceutical companies in preparing their ambassadors to go overseas in order to take technologies over there for them as well. Okay. Oh, I went backwards. Oh, okay, we've just done that. Are you doing it with me?
I can do it if you want.
Or am I really causing this, or are you causing it
No, you are.
when I press it? Okay, because I want to keep going to the next one. And key issues for them are knowing when you've had enough. In other words, when you have been overseas, when to come out. What is enough? Returning home can be even more perilous. The re-entry after you've been immersed in a culture of war or immersed in another culture and a lot of danger and the intensity that involves coming back, and you have a spouse talking about decorating the house or the apartment or their job or whatever, just doesn't seem to be important at all. So there's a lot of transition issues involved in this. And that's where the coaching comes in. So let's talk about the vulnerability of women journalists, which is what we are here to talk about. And in preparing my remarks, I checked back with a number of women journalists that I have worked with in terms of debriefing them and working with them in their assignments. People that are the bureau chief in Kabul, for example, bureau chief in Baghdad, and now the bureau chief in Beirut, which is the center of what's going on in terms of conflict now in the Middle East. So I will share with you a number of their comments. But there certainly was a shift around 9/11, I think even before, in how journalists were regarded. Certainly at that point, journalists became targets, right, when you're in the Middle East. And that's why the work that I do with journalists, that's why we started doing this work, because it became much more dangerous. This is a huge shift. And as I looked at some of I went online the other day just to look at what kind of training is out there in terms of digital security and journalists. And the comment that I came across was that generally journalists are not really, this is not the main thing they're thinking about. It really isn't. They look at security, particularly security for women, as more the larger picture, and the digital technology will fit in within that. But what is key is being really very aware of your surroundings, aware of where you're going, building your community network of support that can support you. And I'll talk more about that. So actually I went to CPJ, which is the Committee to Protect Journalists, and online they had their security protocols, but there was nothing about cybersecurity, nothing about digital. NITE does have training for it. There's the whole conflict about, having bodyguards go with you into, going into Syria or going into one of these places. But certainly what women need to do is really to blend, to look like everybody else, and not to have somebody next to you that looks very different, such as a security person. And what the Times has done is actually had the security advisor report now to the bureau chief, so that they're really there to serve the needs of the bureau rather than the bureau being fit into security protocols which may be set up in a more generic way, which makes it much more effective for them. Certainly cultural issues are huge. Working with a Muslim woman who was bureau chief in Egypt, and talking to me about the challenges she faced in terms of being in a Western bureau as a Muslim woman, and her social life with men, and that if her father ever knew, some of the social life that she had, she could get killed. So there's the huge cultural accommodation that has to be made, and challenges and fears. There's a whole issue about roles in communal living. In the Baghdad Bureau of the New York Times, mostly men there. There's everyone has dinner together and meals together, and if you're the only woman in there, that's a challenge. And in terms of being part of the group. And actually, it's interesting, some of the women became more part of the group than some of the men that I coached, because they had their personalities. Okay, so let me just share with some of the comments that I had. I was talking to Anne, who is the bureau chief in Beirut, and she was saying, actually, that she thought that a lot of the risks were the same for men and for women in danger. There's accidental injury, there's injury from intentional violence, targeted or random, there's kidnapping, and there's official harassment. And that can be to a man or to a woman. In some ways, women are more protected in that in some situations they're regarded, that you don't go after a woman, you don't hurt a woman in terms of the culture. Although that is shifting, certainly, in some areas where, because being a woman makes you more a target. So it can really go both ways. Women can blend more. Women can be just more, when you go into a foreign country as a journalist, it's easier for a woman to blend in terms of the way she dresses, the way she acts. These are all aspects of being safe. Certainly the vulnerability is, I was debriefing people after they'd been held hostage, and so they had them all lying down on the ground, and they lit the guns over them, and they had no idea what was going to happen. And certainly the woman is a little more afraid of being raped at that moment than the men that are lying beside them under the same, terrifying situation. And people are being taken away, and they don't know what's going to happen. Don't know what's going to. Obviously, they all survived because they came back to tell me the story. But terrifying situations that are particularly frightening for women. I also want to share what some of the comments that Alyssa Rubin, she is bureau chief in Kabul at the moment, and she just sent these to me this morning, and so I didn't really have a chance to incorporate them. But in terms of digital advances, her impression is that they've had only a limited impact on the security of those of us, men and women, who are in dangerous places. And interestingly enough, the proliferation of the security industry has made everybody, if anything, overly security conscious. And that means wanting to have trackers and GPS, often to the exclusion of the two most important elements for staying safe: information about where you're going, who you're seeing, and the planning that goes into that. She says, so you take your pocket buddy with you, people will know where you are, can track you, so when you get kidnapped, they'll know where you are. But once you're kidnapped, they take all that stuff away from you unless you have a chip in your arm, which I just heard that some people do have chips in their arms. Then they can still know where you are and hopefully come and help you. So the larger context is really important. And there's also the paradox for journalists. Journalists run toward danger. There's something horrible happening, the journalist runs toward it, right? And the security people are trying to keep you out of danger. Mm-hmm. So there's that odd kind of relationship. So that having the security folks work with the journalists in terms of what they're doing can then provide a great deal of freedom in terms of what their goals are and what they want to accomplish. It really frees them up if it's really done well, and it has been done very well. Other comments that I want to... as I talked about, the way, and she made the comment, particularly in the very divided Arab world, is evolving in a way that is dangerous to Western women in particular, but Arab women as well. Harassment itself is not alone, but rape or attempted rape urged on by elements in crowds who harbor misogynist views of women and see all women outside the home as prostitutes is new and frightening. So this is the new frontier that's very frightening. 5 minutes, thank you, Karen. Okay. Great. So, this and get on to, I think that my colleagues are probably going to talk more about some of these issues here that I'm mentioning. Jennifer Preston, my colleague, social media editor at the New York Times, is extraordinarily concerned about the danger that social media and being tracked brings to people going to demonstrations, going to cover demonstrations, for example. Google has even come out with a tool which will blank out faces now for you, so that there's some protection provided there. But that being able to track people, journalists, anyone going to demonstrations, seeing who is, particularly in the time of revolution in the Middle East, is particularly dangerous. And of course, there's a generational divide that kind of takes us off in a little bit different direction. And the young people, in terms of social media, my daughter said that she's one of my resources for a few comments today. And she said that some people, young women she knows, just have a great competition to get as many people on as friends as they can. People they don't even know. They don't know anything about them. Okay. So let's just look at the tools available to women in this situation. Resilience. I talked a little bit about that a few moments ago. The kind of training and conversations that I have with people, which involves really looking what can you do to keep yourself at the top of your game. When you go into a foreign country, what can you take with you that's going to give you pleasure? Because having pleasure really is the key to being in the top of our game. So people will take different items with them that are comforting. Church sermons, some people will take. Melissa Rubin wrote a whole story about how she takes food. That's comforting for her. So what are the distractions? You're looking at your mindset about your trip. If you're very concerned about a loved one who's ill when you're leaving behind, journalists are always moving, leaving people behind. How can you put your mind at ease about that person? What kind of relationships can you build while you're away to stay in touch so that person is safe? Yoga turns out, as I've talked to colleagues over the years about post-traumatic stress, and it turns out to be one of the most powerful techniques for reducing that stress and staying focused and present. It's a tremendous technique that I'm sure many of you use. And then certainly personal care is very big. Looking at the use of alcohol, drugs, certainly sleep, a critical point. This is a critical point for people that send journalists out. Don't call them in the middle of the night. You know, if you can possibly avoid it. They've probably been out 18 hours, 20 hours covering the story. Pleasure, I mentioned that. The importance of mindfulness, being very present, and techniques for this, which is what keeps you safe. I'm just going to conclude with a paragraph the last paragraph of Alyssa's email to me today. In the end, those of us who work in dangerous places do so because we believe that bearing witness is worth the risk. There are no guarantees, but methodic planning and a willingness to turn back if you sense trouble is the key to staying alive, or staying alive a little longer. There's a little bit of love for the edge in almost everyone who works in war zones or crises. And for me, what helps me to resist the urge to take that extra thrilling risk is care for the people I am with. My translator, my driver, the photographer. And I've spoken to many that have lost such colleagues during assignments and how difficult that is. None of us are alone, are lone operators, and while we freely choose our work, often those working with us, especially locals, are doing it because they must support their family. I owe it to their mothers and fathers and children and spouses to keep them safe.
Little logistical. I'll tell you, you can put mine when it suits you.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to read my slides, I'm going to talk.
Okay.
So whenever you think it's time to change, you
Okay.
change it. Good evening, I'm Courtney Spaeth. It's nice to meet you all, and thank you very much, Karen and Pat, for inviting me to be part of this important discussion today. I am CEO of my own company, and I do work in almost an all-male profession, which is aerospace defense. And as such, I go lots of places that aren't super fun on holidays. You know, Chechnya, Bosnia, the Middle East. It's not like Paris in the spring. So security has been a part of my life for a long time, way prior to 911, as a professional, versus something I worry about in a tangential manner. How many people here feel safe in their own house? Raise your hand. Okay, so when everything, it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whenever you think it's time to change, you change it. Okay. So whe everybody except one who feels a little like that, sort of. We got to talk. How many people here would give their number to a stranger, their phone number or their email or their home address? If somebody walked up to you on the street and said, I really want your home address, your phone number, how many people would do that? Nobody, right? How many people would be at home and leave all their doors and windows open and let everyone in the neighborhood know that you never lock your doors and windows and you don't turn on your alarm? Would anyone do that? But that's really what the internet does. Okay, the internet opens the doors to your house. It opens the doors to your contact information. It does not safeguard your privacy. It does not help protect you where you live. And it's quite a serious thing from a security perspective, especially for women, not to knock my male colleagues in the room. You have to start thinking differently than your parents did, than your mom did, than even a much older sister did, about your personal security. In the digital age. And why is that? Because many of you will meet someone online to date. Many of you will post, if not all of your private information, an enormous amount of it on a social media site like Facebook, or when you get to the working world, LinkedIn. And all of you will interact with people using the internet as a means of communication without giving much thought to, prior to emailing someone, is the system safe? Is it secure? Am I on a trip with my family and I log on to a public network to access my bank account? These are very serious things that you would never do if they were described to you in a practical kind of old school manner, right? I mean, you wouldn't walk around giving people your checkbook, would you? Right. And you wouldn't give people your ATM PIN number, but yet you'll do it online in your hotel room because you need to see what's going on in your bank account, or you need to tell your friends on Facebook, hey, I'm in the South of France or Tahiti or wherever it is, so they know where you are and they can hear about your fun experience. These are all things that are very normal. And as a security professional, it's not really realistic for me to tell you, well, don't use Facebook, don't put any private information up on LinkedIn, whether it's Twitter or the 1,000 other examples we could pick right now that you're going to use on your day-to-day basis to survive in today's world, and not just to survive, but to socially interact. It's not realistic. So the challenges become, how do you protect yourself, both personally and professionally, and your family, while at the same time functioning in the world that we have today? I can tell you that when I first asked to speak on this panel, I had a totally different perspective than I do now. And why is that? Well, I have a company that's made up of a lot of people, and I brought somebody onto our board a few months ago who's a retired, very senior woman from the FBI. And I was sitting in my office one day, and I had a call from Secret Service. We do a lot of work with Secret Service, and they called me up and they said, hey, are you free for lunch? We really need to see you. And I said, oh, all right, I'll work it out. And whenever I met the agent at Maggiano's, had some Italian food, we're chatting, he says, look, there's a problem with you on the internet. And I put my fork down and I said, I'm sorry, what? And he said, well, we look out, they're the cyber crime, they're the electronic crime lead for the government, for the financial industry. And he said, we look out sometimes and we have all these ways to gather information. And we noticed your name in conjunction with a YouTube video, which turned out to be a 9-minute video set to music, starring me. And apparently I was the center of the world's conspiracy theories. It was Hillary Clinton and I, we killed John Benet Ramsey. I was there for the Lockerbie bombing with Warren Buffett. If I'd known, by the way, that I was hanging out with all these super cool people, I would have at least taken photos. It was, me and like Al Roker, who created, all the greenhouse issues. It's a very frightening thing for me to see, and I really freaked out. I guard my privacy. I do media, but I try to do it very quietly. For my business, it's necessary to be in the public, but I try very hard to share the love amongst the other people in the firm. And here's this 9-minute video, right, that anyone can see that has me doing these crazy pants things. That's my word, crazy pants. Works really well with my kids. And I'm doing them not just in a manner that's totally disturbing, but I'm set to music. And it turns out that this board member I brought on, who's retired, very senior at the FBI, her brother, who I've never met, is a paranoid schizophrenic, which is very sad, and does not take his medicine, which is also very sad for him. And he has this obsessive need to sort of humiliate his sister. And when we really watched the video again, we saw in every single frame of the video was a picture of her. So even though I was the star, it turned out I wasn't even the point. It was like, where's Waldo? But it was, where's Chris? Her name's Chris. And, we spoke to her. We were a little taken aback because apparently this goes on all the time for her. And it wasn't something she felt she was obligated to share with us, that there would be a risk if she joined our firm in any capacity that her paranoid schizophrenic brother, who chooses not to take medicine, makes very disturbing videos set to music, and he pulled my picture off the internet from a myriad of publications. Now, we were able to get YouTube to take it down, and that's a very complicated process. It's actually not super easy because of the freedom of speech. They have rules, and you have to have violated the rules. And the way we went about it is we contacted the record company, because I figured I'm not going to fight this battle. I don't want to spend $100,000 in legal fees taking down a video I've never approved, because what YouTube really wants is for you to have a lawyer send them a letter. They have this, you can appeal online, but they really want a legal case made. And it's a very expensive thing to do. So we contacted the record company and we said, hey, look, the CEO and chairman of our company has been sort of, scandalized in this crazy pants YouTube video, and it's been set to music. And you own the rights to that music. And the record company, and we emailed a senior vice president there in London, it belonged to a group in London, he wrote right back. It was like 5 minutes later, I was shocked. And he said, I just looked it up. He does not have our permission to do that. My general counsel is going to get it down. And he did. He got it all down, and then we also wrote YouTube, and they blocked the user. But the point is, I was going about my business, right? And next thing you know, there's a 9-minute video of me. I mean, there are short films that won Academy Awards that are only a small amount lengthier. So this was a pretty significant thing. But I never opened my doors and my windows. I never gave this man pictures of me or personal information. It was what he could get off the web that already pre-existed. So you have to start thinking about, what do you do when you live your everyday life that makes you more vulnerable than you're thinking? And nobody's saying walk around in this paranoid mentality that my house isn't safe, I'm not safe anywhere I go. But if you're going to meet people online, date. If you're going to be in chat rooms, you're going to blog. Unfortunately, the world has changed. And it's no use using the sense of the naivete of the way you were brought up when you were little to govern the way you behave now. You have to say to yourself, just like I lock my door and turn on my alarm, I have to think about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it in the context of this environment. And I have to make sure it keeps my family and I safe. Because once you go out there, unlike your house where you can change the key, change the lock and change your alarm, you can upgrade it, add cameras. Once you're out on the internet, you don't have that ability. And in the digital age, this will affect you tremendously from a security perspective, both personally and professionally. I did not think it was funny that this man who lives in Minnesota, who's brother of a woman I barely know, made this video about me. I wasn't entertained in the slightest. I was actually very disturbed by it. I have children. It wasn't a good thing for my children to see. My daughter was not pleased. She had nightmares. So there's consequences to protecting your information. And I'm a security professional. I do a pretty good job of scrubbing the internet and making sure that I have things in place that hide my home address, that don't allow people to see pictures of me with my family. I'm on Facebook to check out what my daughter's doing. So that's what you do as a parent when you have a younger daughter. But I don't allow her to post things like going on vacation tomorrow. So excited. Because what are you saying? You're saying, I'm leaving my house alone and unguarded. And everybody who can see your post then knows there's going to be no one in that house. Because you said, I'm going on vacation tomorrow with my family. And you're not thinking about the security implications of that. You're thinking it's super cool and super fun to share with 9,000 people, some of whom you know, some of whom you probably never like in real life, the fact that you're all going on a family cruise. And really, is that necessary? Why can't you tell them about it afterwards? You need to start thinking about protocols, especially as women, to protect yourself. Usually if there is a dark night outside and you have to walk far in a parking lot, the way I was raised, I look for somebody to accompany me. Whether it's a group of girlfriends or a gentleman, whomever, somebody I know, so that I can safely get to my car, especially if I don't feel like it's a safe environment. But you don't do that on the internet. No one can accompany you to Facebook. Nobody can walk with you through LinkedIn or whatever else it is. Do you really need the Twitter that you're in the bathroom? But I'm just saying, this is what goes on. This is life. You have become so completely desensitized to the idea that you have to create your own privacy, that you don't do it. Privacy is a right recognized by the Supreme Court, okay, in the last century. It affects all sorts of things, including your right to choose. It's a whole other conversation. But unfortunately, it's not an inherent right that comes with safeguards. You have to proactively manage the way you go about protecting yourself. And you're just not being taught that right now. You know to turn on the alarm, you know to lock the doors, you know to be escorted to and from places. You know not to give your name and number to strangers you meet in a restaurant without having somebody say, oh, I know him and I know her, she's great, he's great, you know, they're not a creepy person. But what you're not thinking about and what you're not educated in it, and as educators, the educators in the room, you have a responsibility to do this, to take a step back and say, how has our world changed and how do I keep them safe? Besides the fact that I don't want guns in my school. You have to start thinking about practically, how are you going to protect yourself? And when you enter the working world, and many of you are not there yet, you have to think about it on a different level. What am I posting I don't want my employers to see? See, when I was growing up and when I entered the workforce, there was none of this. I mean, I could have gone home and danced with a live chicken on my coffee table, and they would have never known. Now, I've got to be worried that if I feel the urge to dance with poultry in my house, somebody's going to have a cell phone camera who's going to video it. Next thing you know, I'm the poultry chicken woman that's getting 10,000 hits on YouTube. And isn't it funny? And then it becomes a phenomenon, and then it's 3 million hits, and next thing you know, Diane Sawyer's talking about the poultry chicken executive on ABC News. And did you give her your permission? No. Is it anyone's business that you have live chicken, like dancing with it in your kitchen? Probably not. But they're going to find out anyway. Whether it's a silly example or a real one, the digital age has totally transformed your ability to be safe. And you're just not thinking about it. Because you don't care, because you're lazy. That's one way of rationalizing it. It doesn't matter, because it's not my problem. That doesn't happen to me. Okay? We call that not in my backyard. Okay? It's not your problem, so you're not going to pay attention to it. Some of it is a total lack of education. I don't know how to protect myself, and I don't know who to ask. Because odds are if I don't know, my parents who are an older generation may not know. And some of it is that you simply aren't thinking that way. And I'm here to encourage you that whether you travel in the Middle East, whether you're a journalist seeking the truth about something that is very hard for a society to discuss, or whether you work, you know, as a dental assistant, you're still all in the same boat. You still have to start to think about when I travel, when I work, when I talk to my friends, what is it that I'm telling everybody that I shouldn't be sharing? And how will that bite me? And could it bite me? It's a whole different level of security awareness. And you talk about bodyguards going in country with people. You know, there's good security and there's bad security. If you go in to Kabul with a giant thug-looking guy, you're probably calling attention to yourself. But if you go in with somebody who PAC's trained, who understands the culture and can fit in, that's a different story. You are more likely to take steps when you travel abroad to keep yourself secure than you are in your own house right now. Security can blend into your life. It can be a tool that becomes part of the equation. It doesn't have to be onerous. Nobody's saying you don't have the right to freedom of speech. What we are saying is actually the responsibility is yours. Nobody else can protect you, not your parents, not your educators. We can educate you. And in today's digital age, you really have to think about that trade-off. Sharing information and having a private life. And, you know, Pat, and in conclusion, I'm going to say, Pat brought up, or maybe it was Karen, the General Petraeus incident, and right or wrong, forgetting the underlying issues about the whole thing. The question really becomes, when you see this thing unravel with everyone's computers and all the emails, what if that were you? What if somehow tangentially you had gotten involved in something and next thing you know, all of your emails are all over the world as news? I don't really think that woman, I don't know her, Jill, when she went and said someone's threatening me, thought that this would unravel to the extent that it has. And the woman who sent the emails, ostensibly, this biographer, I mean, she used different email addresses to send it from, but she sent it from her home laptop. You know, these are, the moral of the story is really don't threaten anyone. But beyond that, these are not smart things to be doing. If you want to communicate with people for bad or for good, remember everything you say in writing on the internet can't get out into the public. And as you grow older and you get these choices about who you interact with professionally, personally, what are you putting out there in that correspondence that really, it doesn't matter what your rights are, that would make the news. If you're looking for a new job and you're on faculty and you all of a sudden want to go to Bryn Mawr College and teach, and somehow somebody hacks into the online system and gets all of your email and starts posting it on chat boards, and your employer can see that you're talking to people about getting another job, you just have to be careful. You have to assume the responsibility is yours to protect yourself, and you can't really blame it on society anymore, because society has created this. Now you have to learn to live in it. And my final note would be, live smartly. Okay, was it Live Strong was the former Lance Armstrong charity? Okay, live smartly. If you want privacy, if you want security, if you want peace of mind, you have to take responsibility for it, especially now. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. The clicker. Do you have a clicker?
She does. She has it.
Oh, do you have the clicker?
Yep.
Thank you. I'm the PDF. It's like a restaurant. I'm the meatloaf with potatoes. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see you all here. I'm fascinated by what my colleague said, and I can't wait when we sit down and can talk about everything. I have some questions for both of you. I'm a journalist, and I have been in, back when I started in journalism, we were print. We didn't have online. By the time we got online, I found that for me the issue was how to protect myself, because now my stories are online. They're not just in, even when it was the Associated Press and it went all over the world, and I saw my stories in German and Chinese and everything, but I was protected by Associated Press. There wasn't really a way to track me down. And then now, I have my own news site, and what I do, a tool that I use, is I buy domain privacy. It costs about $10 a year. And what that does is, I forgot I even had a presentation. Okay, here we go. If you go to whois.net, for instance, and you put the address of a website, the next thing that it's going to show you is, okay, who owns that domain? And what domain privacy gives us for $10 a year is it's like all these guys step in front of me and say, you want to talk to me, you're going to talk to me. And they are people in Provo, Utah, and they have their own phone number. So if anybody wanted to, say, buy my domain or wanted to know about me, or who owns that domain, where are they would have to go through these guys. They are a shield, and an important shield. Especially as a journalist, a lot of the things that I've written about, I'm a real pushback type of journalist. I've seen things. In Barcelona, I learned, this is where the term agent provocateur, which Daniel Craig says way better in Skyfall, comes from. I saw plainclothes police officers start fights with demonstrators at an anti-globalization march. And this was in 2001. I saw them get out of the police van. I saw them starting to fight among each other. I saw demonstrators walk up to them and say, no, 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 no. And then the police officers started bashing them. And then more police officers came, and then more demonstrators came. And then now the riot police is there. And then they're shooting the tear gas canisters, the rubber bullets. And now there's mayhem. And I saw the plainclothes police officers smash the windows of businesses in downtown Barcelona as a way to make people think that the mayhem was coming from demonstrators, and it was actually coming from the government itself. I'm not saying it happens in every situation, but it clearly happened in this situation. When Alberto Gonzalez was named by W. Bush as the Secretary of Justice. I wrote a column, a scathing column, saying, no, just because he's Latino, that doesn't make him cool. Pinochet was Latino, in Chile. It's just like, that's not cool. And so many times, as a journalist online, what I received was hate mail. Not so much a thoughtful conversation, but a hate mail. One of the jobs I had, the editor said, well, as part of our jobs now, we need to look into the chat room, the paper's chat room, and see what people are writing about, what we write about. It's kind of like, the news guys watching the weather guy watch the weather with other people. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. They said, well, it's part of your job. And I said, well, this is what's going to happen. If you have to put it in writing, that's part of my job. Because as a matter of my daily bread, I am not going to go into a chat room and read about people calling me nasty names, or the people that I write about nasty names. I don't want to engage in that. So, we dropped it. Going back to what my colleague said, I wish I could repeat, there was a phrase, but it was very well said. Now I'm going to say it in my clumsy way. It's just, once you're on internet, ta-da, you're there. And your experience with the Google guys to bring down that horrible video, their tagline is "Do no evil," and hiding behind the First Amendment sometimes can be kind of evil, in my opinion. But you see, that's who I am. It's just like I write these kind of things, and then it's sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if I'm hitting the wrong button now. Oh, okay. No. Wait, this way? Okay. Years ago, this is from 2008, then candidate Obama wrote this, made this promise. He did this, I called it a love letter to Puerto Rico, which is where I'm from. He said, if I'm not the president, basically he said, you're all going to get, whatever you want. And I said, yes, right. Presidents don't usually deliver on their promises. All candidates, if they, promise the world. So this actually, the comments I got on this column, most of them were they were okay. It was a conversation. It was thoughtful. I enjoyed it. But I didn't have control over this. On my site, I have control. If you go to my site, there's no room to comment. If you want to get in touch with me, you have to go to a contact page. Here it is. You have to fill out your name, and you have to put your email. And even if you're lying about your email, there's a way that I can find out where that came from. Like that lady, the biographer who sent the emails to the other woman saying the threatening emails. There's a way to track down where people are writing from, what the web service, internet service you're using. Is it Comcast? Is it Roadrunner? Is it Charter? Are you in Massachusetts? Are you in New York? For my sense of safety, I wanted to control how information gets to me, arrives. Now on my Facebook, I don't have 400 friends, even though there are 400 people there. I have an issue with okay, well, this is a friend of a friend. How am I going to say no? It's just, But I have come to sometimes block certain people because they have reposted or they've engaged in public conversations about me, which then all their people can see. And then, that's not how I want Facebook to be used. For me, that's not what Facebook is about. But you can also put controls on Facebook. And the other day, I got so paranoid. I put all these controls, and I was posting, and I was like, I'm posting these really funny things. It's like no one is even liking them. It's like, am I dull? All of a sudden, it was just big. And it was like, I went back to my settings, and I said, only I can see what I post. So I had to go back and open it up. And, that's an exchange, for me to reconnect with people from, my life, to stay in touch in a way. I'm giving Facebook access to what I click, what I write, what photos I upload, and then their algorithms figure out what kind of person I am. I actually think sometimes that, Apple knows more about me than a lot of people who know me very well know about me. Just by the songs I buy, the movies I rent, the gadgets I get. This is Petraeus. I'll get into this in a moment. Let me go back to this. But for me, when I'm thinking about privacy, I'm thinking about, to me, the internet is like a dark parking lot. It is like you're going out there in the dark. And it's, I guess the best way for me to describe it is then my flashlights are software that I can put in my computer and use browsers that will warn me if I'm going into a website that's going to collect information, personal information about me, such as a Firefox browser, which is really good at saying, are you sure you want to go here? They seem dangerous. This web address has a bad reputation. And then I can say, okay, never mind, I'm not going to go to that web address. I know not to click on emails from people. Let me see, there's somewhere here, there's an email. Oh yeah, I had an email from somebody, hey, check out this when you get a chance. It was like some job at MSNBC or something. And it was from a friend of mine. I was like, and then I got it from the same one from another friend of mine. I said, oh, her email's been hacked. And now it's sending everybody on her contact list the very same thing. And they want you to click on the link, and then it takes you to a website, and they can take over your computer. And like, I don't even know how they do this. To me, it's almost like, I guess God exists in the ones and zeros. I don't know, but they can do that. And this is all, this is spam. This is from Elizabeth Warren, the recently elected senator. I get everybody's email because I'm unenrolled in Massachusetts. I don't belong to any party, so they all were just bombarding me online and in print. But this is spam from Elizabeth Warren. And so one of the things that I like about Gmail is you can create these rules to help filter out the people who are trying to get to know more about you. Either to go into your computer because they want to see what credit card numbers you have stored. Because when you're shopping online, your browser sometimes asks you, do you want us to remember your information? And I go, no, I don't. It's just, I'll go through the effort of writing my credit card number again next time I want to buy something online. But I don't want my browser to remember because, everybody gets hacked. It's just, if man made it, it's almost like, remember when we were talking about shortly after 9/11, all the things we're going to do to make sure that nobody else can get on a plane and destroy it. Well, people find new ways. Fortunately, who was the guy? Oh, the one with the shoe, who wanted the bomb in his shoe? The shoe bomber?
Richard Reed.
Yeah? And then came the guy and had the bomb in his underwear. It's just, they find different ways. And then there are these things that maybe they, look into not the eye scanner, I'm misspeaking there, that wand, no?
Full body screening.
I travel a lot, and I declined that closet that you enter, that X-ray, because I don't know if I'm getting too much X-ray when I go into that. So I just said, no thank you, I decline, and then they take me to a room and then they do the big...
Magnetometer.
Yeah. And then one time they found some particles. And so then it was like, oh, now we gotta open all your bags now. And fine, I'm totally cool with this. At the same time, I recognize that a lot of stuff gets through. It's like, we stop people like me, and then they may not stop somebody else, because no system is absolutely fail-safe. So however much we try to keep ourselves safe from predators knowing our business because we're online, you always have to be on your guard. You have to stay on top of what's the best anti-spyware, what's the best antivirus program that's available now, because that's always changing. Going back to Petraeus just a little bit, not to like, and I'm not going to say poor guy because I don't think he's a poor guy, but this was, emails. It was just emails. Your emails live on the server. So if you have a Yahoo account, an AOL account, a Gmail account, whatever, you may use a program on your computer to look at your emails. but they're being, a copy of them is being saved on a server somewhere, depending who your email company is. So it's there for anybody to take who knows how to take that sort of thing. So when I realized this, I said, oh my God. On the other hand, I think, wow, this is really cool about the digital age, because for the first time in history, we are leaving legacies. 10, 15 years ago, people who weren't in the writing field, for instance, as a journalist, I have tons of clips, stories that I've done, columns that I've written. But now people who don't write for a living, all those posts they did on Facebook, on Twitter, on Pinterest, what are the other ones? Like a million. The emails, the chats, everything, they are leaving, and this is the wrong word, but like breadcrumbs, I don't mean breadcrumbs, they're leaving pieces of themselves in the cloud. So tons of people who have passed away, they live on in the digital cloud. And unless their relatives or their loved ones can get through the effort of bringing all that stuff, disconnecting it, there they are, there they remain. My mother died many years ago. I found her on the internet. It was sweet. It was a sweet encounter. Court case, the class action suit that she led. The thing also about the internet, just like Courtney, this poor guy on Facebook, you probably are all familiar, roommate of his videotaped him having sex with his boyfriend. He was embarrassed. He caused him such anguish. He jumped off a bridge. That's how people use digital tools. They think that they're just having a good time, but they're causing anguish. In this case, to an extreme. I like to mention this because that's how dangerous the digital age can also be. That it's not all just like, I just went to the most awesome restaurant, I recommend that everybody go to it. I say this as a Yelper, because I'm a Yelper. Okay, so here's a picture from that incident in Barcelona, where these are the police officers. And these are the demonstrators, just a group of guys who say, wow, awesome, you're breaking the glass, oh my God. And, they're distributing blue jeans, no? To some of the demonstrators. So, a lot of times when I write about stuff, and we write about things that a government isn't doing right, things that the government is doing wrong. And I say this knowing that, for instance, in this country, I get to write those things and I'm not put before a firing squad. And I'm not kicked in the head like people are in other parts of the world. I'm very lucky. So I'm going to take that luck and that privilege and I'm going to point things out. Because otherwise, then I'm as a journalist, then I'm not doing my job. Oh yeah. The Obama citizenship stuff, it has its own Wikipedia page. There are other websites devoted to this, but it also has Wikipedia. It's entered our vernacular, the birthers. This is what can happen to any of us. This doesn't just happen to famous people. I did the search for me, visual search. So you can see, I haven't changed too much. Well, this is me. No.
Are these all you?
Yeah, they're all me. But some of these, it's not my face, but I've written about this stuff. So you wouldn't know it unless you hovered over, then you would see the link to something that I've written about, for instance, Obama, and then there are these two ladies in the center, black and white photograph, these women in Puerto Rico in the 1940s. And I've thought about, sometimes, I just want to leave the internet. Too much of me is out there. But even if I left the internet, it would still be there because of that freedom of information, that First Amendment, which I think is great. But it can backfire on you too. People can find you when they're not even looking for you. You put the search term New England in Google, you'll get the New England Wikipedia, you'll get the Patriots, their homepage, and then you'll get the New England Journal of Medicine. So you could put in somebody's name like Jane Miller, and if there's a Jane Miller in here, maybe I'm not looking for you, but you came up in the search. I was looking for another Jane Miller. And then maybe because I found you, say, oh, well, let me see, that's interesting what you're doing. And then all of a sudden, you're not just known to your people, you're known to the perfect strangers. And there's a way for people to attract, you put an email, there's a program, there's a website where you can put somebody's email, you can find out so much about them just by their email, where they live, what internet service they use. Then you can find their number. And of course, for all of us who are registered voters, that's public information already. I mean, already we have information out there. What the internet does is just, it comes with a big, orchestra and a spotlight and puts it out there even more. Because there are places such as this, and you can get all sorts of information, the address, everything, where we lived 5 years ago, 10 years ago, last year. I'm going to wind down now. I would like to leave you with that there are tools that you can use, such as, for you, those of you who are bloggers, those of you who like to share on Facebook, is who are you sharing with and what are you sharing? And then when you become friends with people who you're not really friends with, be thoughtful about, well, why are you going to become friends with them? Because if, for instance, Karen, you wanted to be my friend, I'll be your friend. But then if your friend, Elizabeth, wants to be my friend, so, well, she's Karen's friend, so she must be okay, she must be cool. Okay, yeah. But if I didn't know Elizabeth already, I didn't have some sort of connection to her, then I would say no. Because it just exponentially grows and puts you out there more and more. And I agree, so much. It's like, don't be announcing where you are if you're leaving your house. Because that tells a few or hundreds or thousands of people all of a sudden that your house is empty. I guess the final note, and I could go on, but I'm not gonna, is I recently changed all my passwords because I thought it was time to do that. Because it happens, it will happen to a lot of us that we will be hacked. Our emails will be hacked. And people think, it's not going to happen to me because I don't really do anything online except email and maybe a little bit of Facebooking. It doesn't matter. The spammers, they just want to know if they can get your credit card number. They want to know if they can get your, they want to know if they can get something out of you that they can use to get some money. That's what they want. And if you haven't done it already, I would encourage you to Google yourself and see, and not just look at the first page, because you may not be in the first page. You may be on the 10th page or the 15th page. And when you find yourself, see where you are, in what context, how did you get there? And then, react accordingly. If you're in places where you don't want to be, then that may be, okay, turn the comments off on your blog. Then maybe not have as many friends, not have 5,000 friends, unless you really do have 5,000 friends. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to, I know that the night is, or it's not night yet, but the time is passing. I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity, if you'd like, to respond to one another, and then I'd like to just collect a couple of questions and then open it up for discussion. I'm not sure if any of you want to respond first, or you just want to open it up. What would you prefer?
I have a question. It says, when you talk about debriefing, what's that process like?
You're talking about the debriefing from a traumatic event. Yeah. That's the process whereby people who have been through a horrific event, we have a conversation about it that will help them to work this through so that it will not be lasting. We started this in the New York Times because there were people that after 2 years said, I'm out of here. And they said, why are you leaving? Well, and they remember 2 years ago they'd been next to someone who was shot. So they're losing a lot of good talent to this. And in the debriefing process, I'm trained in that. I have a background in psychology and social work. It's really having a structured conversation about their experiences in such a way that helps them to process it and to let it go. It never goes away entirely, but our goal is to really help them not focus on it. And it is also involves activating areas of pleasure in your life, going through what are areas of pleasure, and it involves mindset, cognitive work that I do with them as well. And it's a great relief, and they can then move forward and go back, and that's the whole purpose. It's really, and we find as a result of that, very few people, well, we don't know what all the causes are, but very few people develop PTSD, which is, symptoms lasting more than a month, severe symptoms lasting more than a month.
Mhm.
Did that answer?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, questions, comments?
I have a question,
Yeah.
Courtney. Now, what are you doing differently now that this has happened to you with the video? Have you set up your name for a Google alert? Are you vetting potential board members in a different way? What has changed for you?
My name is definitely on an alert. We are definitely, we have created a new contract for anyone who joins our firm that stipulates that if they have any information that could put a member of the firm at risk about an activity that could put a member of the firm at risk, meaning you have a relative who's unstable and makes crazy pants YouTube video, or in some way you have a violent ex, whatever. We're basically saying we're a private company, and this is a condition. You have to disclose. We're telling you have to give up your right to privacy in that sense. You have to let us know if there's anything about you coming to us that would lead to a problem for the firm, because even though we are privately held, we do have a responsibility to our employees, and if our employees are put in a situation that's relatively detrimental to their security, they won't perform.
Do you think they are honest about it?
I think most people inherently are honest, actually. I think it's human nature to be honest about something, and I think that it depends on how you phrase it and how you go about it. We certainly don't punish them for it. I think that we make it clear that if you have pre-existing knowledge of a potential problem and you don't disclose it, there will be consequences. Nobody's blaming you for a problem, and nobody's saying they're going to run around the company telling everybody, but they have to tell the head of HR. And then she's in a position to determine what the senior management needs to know to make a decision. Will it affect one way or the other? But that's just life nowadays, I don't think it's any different than having a student come forward and say, and we just had this at DC College in Washington, D.C., that they were having lunch with someone who said, he was very upset about his breakup and said, I just feel like shooting people. So there's an expectation of privacy to some degree and a right to the freedom of speech, but not if it's detrimental to the health and well-being of the people around you. And it's this, it's a slippery slope, but at the same extent, I think it's an important thing. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
She had a question.
Yeah. Perhaps it's not a question, but it's a case which might turn out to be a question. I'm from Zimbabwe, and while we don't have such stringent laws around, protection of, expression, freedom of expression, it's not even stated anywhere in our constitution expressly. So what you have is this very tense environment where these new media is not necessarily incorporated into any kind of formal legal structural repercussions or consequences, but then when it suits the state, they will find ways to use it. So I think 2 years ago, a man was arrested for having posted something on his Facebook page about the president. And then I don't know how, it must have been one of his friends was a spy of some sort who alerted the officials. Someone took a screenshot, and that was used for evidence in the case. But then I look at examples such as myself. I am a journalist as well, and I have lots of journalist friends on my Facebook page, on my private account, and I don't open my account up to subscriptions. We have to have, you add me or I add you and someone accepts. There has to be a mutual relationship there. But then I have had instances where I think I'm talking to my friends and someone is out there looking for something else. So last year someone used a comment I made in a front page story from my Facebook account. Something happened again this year. And the reason I find these things out is because I have an automatic alert for my name if anything goes on Google. But it's hard now to know how to have a communication or a conversation with someone or people who are, and you know that Facebook is, the people who are on your Facebook page are not necessarily all friends, you know that, but are acquaintances who you would want to have this conversation with in this space that is not necessarily, I mean, you can't say it's not going to go anywhere beyond that space because that space is anywhere and everywhere anyway. But how to, I mean, you now have to censor yourself basically because for the people who wouldn't misuse your information, you have to deprive them of yourself for the ones who could misuse it. So this kind of how to balance yourself as a social being, but try to also protect yourself from the people who are not necessarily there to for the best interests of you, and how to trace those people back, because in Zimbabwe when you write sensitive issues, a lot of the time the people who post anonymously, so you can't even trace back which of your friends was the person who took your comments and used them in an article. And so you're like, what can I talk about and what can I not talk about? And there's absolutely no protection anyway.
True, and you make a decision based on how safe are you. To say, because the point of having then Facebook, for instance, or blogging is because you have things you want to share. And you don't want to, from my point of view, yes, you're absolutely right. Balancing your security, your safety, with what you want to say, and what could be the potential harm in you saying what it is that you're saying, what you want to say. But I think that's the thing about the internet. Once it's out there, and anybody can cut and paste and put it in any other context, as happened with Courtney. It's just, you're out there.
Maybe I could ask this follow-up. I mean, so what is your responsibility to your friends as well? Because when you initiate a discussion that may be controversial and they respond, then they are also putting themselves out inadvertently. I mean, they're just responding to what you're saying. But if you start saying, well, you never know who's watching what we're saying, so just be careful, don't comment too often, then you chase people away from talking to you. So how do you engage with people because you want to engage with them, but at the same time not expose them to these dangers of people who are not even their friends, but by virtue of being your friend, these people now have access to their comments, and then they go and use them in a way that is not, I mean, that's not why they commented. They're talking to you. They didn't want to talk to the world and have their comments on it.
Well, there are things that you can do, for instance, on Facebook, on your settings, not what I did, which I said earlier, I ended up like posting only so I could see. But you can create a group that only that group, if it's 5 people, only you 5 people can see it, and you all have to agree that that's going to be the setting. So it's not like, okay, us 5, but my setting is all my friends. Then I would also have to put, okay, it's just us 5 that will see the postings of any of us 5. You can do that with the Facebook. And if you're blogging, there are software applications out there, a lot of them free, if you use WordPress or you use Google's with the blogging, the platform blogger.com, where you'd have to sign in. And then, but the only way you can see what anybody has said is because you sign in, you have a password, you sign in, and you only see what other people have, the people you agreed that could have that access will be in that conversation, and no one else.
Natalia, everything that goes on into Facebook can see, right?
Yes.
So that's the other level. That's the backdrop of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that really everything, even though you say you're only sharing it, even if you don't share it with yourself, Facebook knows it.
Yeah.
And that's the data
It owns
that
it.
gets mined when you go in and you see, you know, oh, there's something about a women's issue, blah, blah, blah. Isn't that interesting? It's on my page as I'm involved in, you know, that's what happens, the huge mining of this data. So
Yeah.
yes, you can limit it there, but once it's up there,
Yeah.
they have it and using it commercially like crazy, and for negative things, preventing you from getting a mortgage because you live in a certain neighborhood or because you go to certain stores. You know, that I don't know whether you distributed that op-ed piece. There's an op-ed piece by a woman, Lori Andrews, who has a book on privacy. I saw what you did, and I know who you are, and I saw what you did, is the name of the book. And she has an op-ed piece in the New York Times you can Google very easily that talks about this. It's astonishing, the amount of data that is mined about all of us every time we put something on Facebook.
Can y'all talk about accountability with like anonymous users in places? Because like I know I blog on Tumblr and people can respond anonymously to that, and there's just, I guess, a huge issue with accountability and like being able to, because we feel secure if we know where people are from, but if it's an anonymous thing, then you don't.
There's no guarantee to privacy when you are on a blog that allows, or a site that allows anonymous users. You have no right to ask for their information. What you do have is a choice, which is I'm not going to blog on that site because I can't see who's responding to me, and that makes me uncomfortable. So then you have to pick a different site that's more secure. You have more control over seeing the identity of the people, but there's no way to make someone not be anonymous if that's what the site allows. And you have no recourse for accountability if you don't like what they're saying or how they're behaving, because you've chosen to participate in what is basically a public forum. It's just online.
Yeah. And Tumblr, and you check your settings, and then either you go with it and let anybody comment, or, you know, I know that on WordPress, which is very similar to Tumblr, you can actually set it so only people who identify themselves can comment, and you can hold their comment for moderation so you see it before it goes online. You have to literally intentionally, okay, this can be public on my blog. You're once you're online, you're public, and there's some things that you can do to give yourself some privacy, but it's almost like the only way you get privacy is like going off the grid. Like, don't have ¿cómo se dice? What's this thing called? Electricity. Don't have an electric bill. You know, don't have a water bill. Don't have a bank account. You know, you'd have to go to these extremes to get off the grid. And even so, maybe you're on the grid, because if you bought the property, you certainly are on the grid, because there's a way of finding out in the registry of deeds who owns that property. The same way with online. If you have a blog, and maybe Tumblr isn't the best way to blog for you. Maybe, you know, look for other blogging platforms, like Blogger, that does give you much more control over who can comment on your blog, or like WordPress. And there are tons of videos on how to do it, how to move your stuff over. So it's not like you have to cut and paste everything you've ever written into a new blogging platform. That's what I would recommend. And the responsibility part, I believe that this is what I do. I have different identities. I have my geek identity, where I go into chat rooms when I'm trying to find out stuff, because one of the things that I ended up doing was designing their websites. And sometimes I have a question. It's like, I can't figure out how to do something, so I got to go into Geek World and ask them, I'm having this issue, can you help me? And I don't want to go in as Natalia. That's just too public. So I have, this alter ego, and with another email, another name, everything. And using that account, that's how I sign into these chat rooms to get the information I need for the work I'm doing.
I have a larger question, and my question is, listening to all of you, it sounds like we're already in in some respects 1984. I mean, in terms of total surveillance on the one hand. On the other hand, total vulnerability. So it seems like there's a disconnect between using technology as a form of protection when technology is exactly the form that makes us the most vulnerable. And it seems to me that laws have not caught up. We're talking about handbooks that haven't caught up. And the technological changes are so rapid that it's really hard to figure out how to regulate when it comes to issues of privacy or issues of copyright. I mean, there are all kinds of issues. But also in criminal activities, I mean, in terms of prosecuting, search, and when you can go in and search, do you need a search warrant or not? I mean, all these issues that still haven't been ironed out. And also the globals, that you're not just, it's just not a national issue, it's a global issue. Right? That you're out there globally, you're not just here nationally in your own little locale. So that's one of my questions is, I don't think, it seems like we're not going to catch up, and it seems like we either get used to it and learn how to maneuver, learn how to negotiate, or where do we have some control? But then my second question is particularly for women, and I really, we're not in those fields. I mean, Courtney, you said you're one of the few women who's in the field of security. Mm-hmm. You look at sort of technological fields, mm-hmm. etc. But women use social media, so women are using more social media than men. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, they're more vulnerable, they're more public. So, I mean, is that another solution? I mean, to bring more women into this, to sort of think about some of these other issues of vulnerability.
I mean, I think you're talking about law and order, and the problem is that law and order has not evolved to where we are as a society right now in terms of the challenges and the mechanisms which we perform with. Mm-hmm. And what needs to happen is some of the laws need to catch up, and there needs to be an international protocol that's put in place about stealing intellectual property, about privacy, all sorts of things. And that's something that the government's been working on for a while, and it's a very hard thing. Everyone has different standards. Every country has a different sense of what is okay. China is vastly different from ours, for example. Mm-hmm. So I think, when you talk about the total surveillance state, there are still laws in the United States that govern what the government can do with that information. And those laws are strictly adhered to because when there is a violation of it, there is usually accountability. But, it's important that as we graduate, lawyers and women are becoming more and more dominant in the legal field. I believe it's over the 50% in law school are female, that they start to look at these things as areas where they can make a difference and practice law to set up accountability, to set up legal, appropriate, constitutional ways to assist society to deal with this. There are no more boundaries, really, and there's no borders. I mean, I don't have to respect the border of a country when I can get it in online. I can talk to anyone I want around the world, anywhere I want, without a visa. Mm-hmm. And the concept of that has really revolutionized what your rights are in terms of the government also being able to solicit that information without permission. And it's a very important legal area that needs a lot of work.
And I was aware that the government is working on that, because I know Tanzita Vega, who was potentially could be a speaker here one of these days. She covers privacy at the New York Times, and that is something that she's covering those proceedings of really bringing the laws up to date. And the other person I mentioned a moment ago, Lori Andrews, I know who you are, and I saw what you did. She's proposing a social contract, I believe is what she calls it. A real agreement. And I've also heard that there have proposed ways to just totally take yourself offline. People are trying to dream up ways where you can just clean it up. Get yourself wiped clean off of that.
It's very expensive.
That's what you want to do. Is it possible to do it now?
I mean, you can pay somebody to basically digitally erase you, but that doesn't mean it's going to keep going. And meaning that then you do something else, and it's almost impossible to exist without being on the internet nowadays.
Yeah, that's the other thing. would you want that?
But you can pay somebody to do search engine optimization and all sorts of things that kind of make it harder for someone to find you. It's very expensive.
So reverse optimization.
Correct.
So we think about.
It's very expensive, and there's no guarantees. It depends on the level of competency of the professional that you hired, if they can be effective with it or not. There's no guarantee to privacy anymore online, and there's no accountability except what society puts in place to deal with things. And this becomes a discussion about employment, because as an employer, how do I hold my employees accountable? What's appropriate for what they're posting online? How does it affect our brand? How does it affect the harmony in the office? If someone's going home and blogging about the office and really bashing the other employees, what's my role in that? Do I have a role in that? Am I violating this person's privacy by firing them? I don't know. If it wasn't done on a work computer, I'd have to call a lawyer and ask. And these are very complex scenarios that really are affecting the workplace. I mean, did anyone see that movie? Was it Julia and Julia?
Yeah.
Right. It's about Julia Childs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's a scene where Amy Adams is in her boss's office in New York, and she called in sick, but she's blogging that she's got to remake the beef bourguignon, whatever it is. And, she comes in the office the next day, and he's like, do me a favor, if you're going to lie, don't put it online, that you're doing something else. You called and said you had the flu, and then I'm looking at your blog, and it's saying, no, I'm making beef for, the editor of whatever it was. So you also have to be a little intelligent, too, about how you approach those things, because employers do look. It's not outside the realm of possibility that if you call in sick and then post on Facebook, woohoo, I'm at the beach, your employer won't see that. And then you
That
actually,
happens.
and then you can
All the
get
time.
fired for an integrity issue.
I'd like to add that just as in the real world, in the virtual world, women have to take extra caution, have to be extra guarded.
Yeah.
That what you were saying earlier, yes, just the way we have access to all this other information. And it's great. Oh my goodness, what was the name of that movie that had, what's his name? And then let's just Google it. Wow, there it is. That's great. But that also means that, what was referenced earlier, is that people may be looking for something else and you get caught in the net of what, they weren't looking for you, but you somehow came up.
But that
for
raises
whatever reason.
such a good question for all of you. How many of you have Googled yourselves and do it on a periodic basis? Right?
Oh, good.
Me too. We do it even before the video. We did it once a month for me and for my firm. It's just it came in between the 30-day period. So you need to do that, because I don't know how many of you are single and looking to date someone, but a new phenomenon for a lot of my friends they're getting Googled before their first date, and so they'll go to dinner or drinks or whatever with somebody, and that person will say, oh, I know you, I picked this restaurant because I know you like sushi. Mm-hmm. And the question is that thoughtful or creepy? If it becomes what everyone's doing, does the creepiness factor get ameliorated by the fact that it's a societal norm? I've got to be honest with you, I'd much rather you ask me what I like than have you extrapolate it from data online. But, if your friend comes home and she's like, he took me to a sushi restaurant because he saw that I like sushi, do you say that was thoughtful, or do you say stalker or possibility stalker? It's totally changed the discussion about your personal life and your professional life, this tool. And it's not going away. So the only thing you can do is protect yourself with it, I just think it's a whole different world for you than it was when we were younger and in school.
And the LinkedIn, the same thing. If you meet, I'm just getting so used to it now.
Oh, yeah.
People say, "Oh yeah, so I saw that you were doing Europe and whatever," because you put all this stuff out about yourself professionally on LinkedIn, and that's kind of the purpose, right? For people to know who you are, what you're doing, and make connections. And then other people will say, well, I'm not sure that we want to work with you on this because you don't have people in that particular area. They've gone in and looked at your
It's very
community
annoying.
and know who. Anyway, it's the way it is.
I have a friend who hates his job, and he put his resume out to a couple people. He thought privately, me and 3 or 4 other people who are professional and senior. And one of them put it on something called Mindshare, which is a community of like 1,000 professionals in the DC area that all kind of talk to each other. I can't imagine about what. I don't have the time to care. I didn't even look it up. But I get this phone call from him, super panicked, because his boss is on Mindshare, apparently, and someone forwarded him the resume and said, something about it. Now, she had taken his name off of it, but unless you were a total idiot, if you read it, you knew who it was. And he, I think, really had a cow for about 2 weeks waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
So you also have to think about, when you distribute things that are relatively innocuous, what the consequence is. I mean, have you really thought through putting your resume out while you're still employed, in a blog or in a giant group or in a whatever it is, posting online? Because it's probably pretty realistic that your employer is going to run into it. And then what are the consequences for you?
The thing about the internet is that it feels like every day it's a brand new toy.
Yeah.
It's still so new that it's still thrilling, and we haven't gotten to the point where, whatever, I'm doing something. And so we are oversharing.
Oh, yeah.
And some of us think that what we're doing is extremely
Interesting.
interesting.
It's so not.
And it's not. What it is, it's making you vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where what my colleagues are saying is just to be thoughtful about what are you sharing and why, and to whom are you who are you sharing with?
Well, another question for people here is, it seems to me like my daughter is 17, and she has no sense of the word appropriateness. She just does not get what's appropriate. She overshares everything because the internet has taken away her ability to use common sense. She'll tweet, "I'm in the bathroom," and I will say to her, "Erica, nobody cares. Nobody in the entire world wants to know that you're in the bathroom." But they've just this generation coming up has lost total sight of the fact that some things really are supposed to be private. If your parents are fighting, you don't need to go post on Facebook, "Mom and Dad are fighting and I'm upset."
That happens all the time.
It does. And then, all of a sudden, you're fighting with your husband or your wife or your partner, and the phone rings and it's your mom. "I saw online that you and John are fighting." And I'm like, we had a 2-second argument about who turned up the thermostat. Then it's my aunt and my sisters, and it's like, you just got married, you're not getting divorced. Right, next thing you know, my entire hometown thinks, we're in turmoil. So, these are, you have to think what's appropriate.
That happens with my daughter.
Right.
Because something will happen in the conversation at dinner, and she goes, it's just like, oh my God.
It's extremely annoying.
I'm curious as to your opinion on industries that are kind of driven by social media. Like, of course, the movie industry is a big example because a lot of the stars and a lot of the directors, they just tweet everything, and that's kind of what keeps their jobs going. So I'm curious as to what your opinion is on that.
On the entertainment industry, using it as a PR.
Or just like
really.
any type of industry, just like overusing it to the point of they can't really survive without sharing their whole lives on the internet.
Oh, it's a huge part of the success of many businesses. I mean, a lot of this, the Twitter is your PR tool. It's your, the more you get out there, the more, and it determines the kind of business you get, right? Because the medium is the message, right? The way you go about it is going to determine the kind of work you get. I think it's just a fact. What do you guys think? Any thoughts about that?
It has certainly changed in terms of marketing. It certainly has shifted where people are spending their money. They're spending far less money because you can get a free Twitter account, and if you're a movie star and you want to promote your movie, you just Twitter it out to your fan base, and then it starts spreading. Or you put something up on YouTube and it starts spreading. You don't have to pay all that money, so it comes out on television.
Right.
1 million times. Though Paranormal comes on 1 million times. Paranormal 4 freaks me out. It's like I'm never old enough to get freaked out by that kind of movie. But it's changing the conversation, and not only just the conversation, but the content and how deep we go into something. Because Twitter, as I assume you have very little room to say something. Mm-hmm. So it forces you to really get to the resin, to get to the essence of what you want to say, and so now we're doing the shorthand, and we're also like, instead of writing out U-Y-O-U, it's just the U. We're getting into this new hieroglyphic. We're going back to the hieroglyphic age that anthropologists 100 years from now will have to this is
new
what
language.
They were saying. Yeah, it's a new language. Though I think in that sense, Twitter to me is less personal than Facebook. Twitter is just about following people or organizations that you're into. I mean, some people use it for personal reasons, but I think it gives you room to just connect with, political people or pundits or business people or magazine writers, and it becomes interesting to stay on that conversation. Yet, having said all of that, I feel there are just not enough hours in the day to do Twitter, Facebook, and
I certainly don't have that.
Pinterest, and
Well,
Yeah.
well, a lot of people will say, though, if you're starting a business, to have a business, you have to have your social networking strategy in place.
Oh, yeah.
And that we all do have to have a presence on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter actually is very powerful for recruitment. I don't know what's known, but recruiters go out on Twitter as one of the richest databases for recruiters.
Mhm.
So I think we all have to have a presence. Now speaking from the point of view, not of privacy, but of the opposite, right? Getting out there,
branding.
what we want to get out there. Branding, exactly. It is an important part of branding. It's also, as you say, extremely time-consuming, and it's costly. It costs a lot of money to do that.
Mhm.
I know in my business, I had someone give me a whole plan of how I should hit my social. And, well, you do have to have someone do it for you. And
Yeah.
you pay someone to do
Yeah.
it, and it's costly. It's an extra thing. You have to determine the reward, but you have to do some of it in order to have, it gives you credibility.
Legitimacy.
Yeah.
It's like a guilty pleasure of the internet at this point. It's like, for me, I like U.S. Weekly. It's my guilty pleasure. I read this magazine, and my husband thinks it's hilarious because I want to see what the stars are wearing and where they ate. The internet's a little bit like that with the social media. Some of it is useful in an academic sense. Some of it is useful in a business sense, and some of it is a guilty pleasure. And that's what Twitter sort of is. You get to follow Demi Moore, and it's like your secret thing that you don't really want to tell your professor, but you think it's super cool to find out that Demi Moore checked into rehab and now she's twittering about it. I mean, it's the appetite for it is not decreasing. It's going up and up. For some reason, people are fascinated with, the famous and the minutia of their life. And if you don't like it as a generation, then don't participate in it.
Can I add something about, I don't subscribe to New York Times. I'm one of the people who, does anybody get subscribed online to the New York Times? Oh, and you pay for it? Okay. I'm the one who doesn't pay for it. It's just because when you reach 10 articles, it says you're at your 10th article, subscribe. I just take my laptop and find another place to go so I can keep reading the story and get another 10 stories.
Oh, really? If you log in again,
and
you
as a
get another
journalist,
10?
it's awful. I know, I have to confess. It's awful because the subscription helps pay
For you to live.
for journalism to thrive. But for issues I don't want to get into, I'd rather just go someplace else with my laptop. But the thing is, they know, and I don't even know who they are.
Yeah, who is they?
I don't know, but there are people behind all this coding that know I've reached my limit. Now, these may be good people, or they may be not good people.
I think it's probably an algorithm.
It's an algorithm, it is, that somebody has put together. But at any point, people can go in and see, let's see how many people reach their 10, articles this month. And so that's a person maybe who then analyzes that data, who knows then it's me from this address, from this location, from this IP address. And I think sometimes, and this I could be very paranoid, you tell me, just like that kid who went into the Batman movie,
Oh, the shooter?
who everybody said, yeah, he was kind of weirdo, but kind of nice. And I have not been to a movie theater since without looking at the exit sign.
No, it does change your sensory
Yeah.
perception, because usually my family will make fun of me when I go somewhere. I have to see where the doors are.
Yeah.
And I don't like sitting without my back being against the
Yeah.
wall. And I'm a security professional. This is how I was trained.
Yeah.
Now we go to movies, and my daughter is like, where are the doors? Are they locked? Because it freaked her out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas, maybe that doesn't serve a great purpose in society.
But you don't know who.
No.
I mean, it could be somebody like that who has access to your information.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can have access to your information. It's not just nice people like us. It's anybody. And I don't even know if you're all nice, really.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I had a couple questions actually, sorry. I know that I came in late, so I don't know what I missed, but I was wondering what you think of the ethics are of like dropping cookies on people when they visit sites. Like I know both campaigns were dropping 30 or so cookies when you visited their campaign sites that would track you and then use the data of where you went to target you with marketing. And I was wondering what you thought of how that's ethical in terms of consumers being targeted using specific information that they're not aware is being used against them in psychological ways. And then I was also really curious what you thought of the technology being used in cyber warfare and things like Stuxnet that are now targeting people like Chevron and Fortune 500 companies, and Anonymous, who's now working on behalf of the people in Gaza.
Well, as to the first point, the cookies. There's this. If you use Firefox browser, for instance, you can and I think the Google Chrome browser, you can say don't accept cookies.
You can disable them.
Yeah, and then but then there are these other kind of cookies that this place called NoScript. It's a software that you can put on your computer. They still collect information. It's like you get rid of one, and then another one comes along, and then so it's almost like you have to stay on top of it. Searching for what's the latest threat, and then the solution to the latest threat. The thing about the cookies, I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's right for anybody to follow where I go next after I leave their website. That would be like I walked into JCPenney and now one other people is going to follow me as I go into Best Buy. It's like, I don't want to be followed. You're in my space. And that's the thing about virtual reality. There is no respect for that space.
No boundaries.
No boundaries.
Regarding the cyber warfare, I mean, that is the big thing right now.
That's the big security.
I mean, I'm surprised we haven't really been attacked already. I mean, you don't actually have to put men or women at risk and strap bombs on them or give them box cutters or make them go through security. You can just bring down the entire traffic organization with a keyboard, which causes a lot of problems if you're up in the air during that period of time. I think it's the number one threat right now to us as a nation, and I think we're not going to do enough about it until something occurs, and then we'll be reactive because we're never proactive about our infrastructure. And I think the private sector needs to participate really actively in that dialogue at the moment because a lot of that infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector. But they view security as overhead, and they don't want to spend the money. They'll take the risk. And the question is that really the best decision for the nation? In terms of the frequency of the attacks, they're quite frequent from nation states as well as transnationals and sort of unique groups like Anonymous. I think you're going to see a rise in that, and I think you're going to see not an equivalent rise in, defensive positioning against it. Whether it's a form of warfare that requires an equivalent retaliation, I think is still being worked on. So, for instance, if Iran, shuts down the entire banking system of the United States electronically, is that akin to a major act of war and therefore justifies us bombing them into oblivion? What are the parallels? That's still very hard to figure out, and it's a big deal. It's a very big deal.
Okay, I want to thank our Annette optimistic. I want to thank once again Natalia, Courtney, and Pat for sharing their insights on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.